So hello again. I don't think I properly introduced myself at the very beginning. My real name is Alex, but online in the crypto world, I go by Aventurine. For those who don't know what Aventurine is, it is actually a type of quartz crystal. Typically quartz is like a clear white, but there's a special type of quartz crystal. It's called aventurine, and it actually has like a green hue to it. And the quick story behind that is I noticed that early on when I started in Numerai back in 2020 that a lot of people had multiple models, and a lot of people actually had themes to their models. So one of the guys that I was watching was HB, and for those that remember HB, he hasn't really been around in a bit, but he was a rocket scientist that worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California in the USA, and he worked on satellites, so all of his models he named after different satellites. So I was like sitting there at the computer one day, and I was trying to think of a theme that I could use for my models, and my wife collects like rocks and crystals and that sort of thing, and I was sitting there looking on my desk, and I saw these like crystals there, and I was like, okay, well, what is something that like means like wealth and abundance and making money? And typically jade is what comes up. It's like also a green stone, but that's a really, really common name, and this was the second one. So I went with this as like my first model, and then it just ended up being the name that stuck. But I wanted to ask before I go into this, because I don't really want to talk about myself for that long. How many people in here don't work as a data scientist or in finance now?
Like normal day job.
Yeah, like normal day job. Okay, that's pretty good. Because that was my scenario coming into this. I will just go right into here. Sorry, there's a lot of text, but I'll keep it brief. Because the background on me, I did not have any data science background when I found Numerai. Out of high school, I actually joined the U.S. military. I live in California in the U.S., in Los Angeles. So I joined the U.S. Army out of high school, and did that active for about 4.5 years, and then I did another 4 or so in the reserves. I initially was a forward observer in an infantry unit, which is like that guy on the front lines with the radio that would like call in the air strikes and the artillery strikes and stuff like that. And during the surges in Iraq in 2006 to 2007, I was deployed overseas for almost 1.5 years in Iraq. And when I came back, really didn't have like a lot of skills that transferred into the civilian sector. I was definitely a lot fitter. And the only extra skills that I had, because I wasn't just an infantry soldier, was like working with like radio communications and that sort of thing, but that wasn't something that interested me at all. So I switched into the medical field after my first term of service in the military. So I actually went back active duty again for training, and I ended up getting a associate's degree as a laboratory lab scientist. So I got licensed in the state that I was living in, and I was working in hospitals and other laboratories testing blood samples, like when you go to the doctor and you get your blood taken, and specialized in all different parts of the lab. But one big issue, and I mean, I don't, since we're in Europe, I'm not sure, how much people know about like the politics of the different states in the U.S., but, the U.S. is an interesting place because a lot of states run things on their own, and different states are more liberal, some are more conservative, and then you have like the federal government that oversees everything. California is definitely on the liberal side of things, and sometimes they have a lot of rules that don't make a lot of sense. And so one of those rules was, in order for you to perform certain laboratory procedures like working with blood transfusions or reading like microscope, blood samples from microscopes, you actually had to have a bachelor's degree, like the 4-year college degree. And it would not take my military service or training to actually perform those duties. So when I went back to California, literally all I can do is like load the samples into the machines and like call doctors and tell them the results. But if there's anything off with them that required a little bit more skills, they wouldn't allow me to do it. So I got a bit bored with it because I like to work in like technical areas. So I ended up switching into the field engineering role, which is like the actual lab company itself that manufactures laboratory instruments. So I started specializing in clinical chemistry, and my job there was to actually drive to different hospitals and labs all over Los Angeles and like install and fix lab instruments that were having issues.
So that was the part of that startup, the drop of a blood, the lady.
Theranos? No, I actually thought about applying because she just had like that aura of like Steve Jobs and the whole Silicon Valley thing. But it's like the more you look into it, especially if you were like already in the lab world, like you would realize that those like micro samples that they were taking, there was really like no possibility of being able to like accurately test for certain things with like blood samples that small. I mean, you have like capillary blood, but like usually when we run these samples, like you actually have to like centrifuge them down to either like serum or plasma because like the blood cells interact. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that.
But you didn't need fully into that.
But yeah, so like her thing was like, you could prick your finger, put it in a little test tube, and then the machine
We
was...
had a similar idea
Yeah.
with the startup I was mentioning. We were doing it with mass technology.
Yeah,
Which
that actually might
might
be a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, her thing was interesting because she had her own manufactured instruments, and they were like cartridges that you would put into these machines.
That was the weird part.
Yeah.
If there would be a technology like mass technology.
Yeah, mass spectrometry, that might work better. The other thing too was kind of weird to be able to walk into like a drugstore or like a pharmacy and just be able to get a lab test. It's weird. Anyway, I decided not to apply, which was a good thing because like 2 years later, like all that shit went down. But the company I work for, I'll just say the company I work for. I work for a company called Beckman Coulter, and they're like one of the largest manufacturers of laboratory instruments around the whole world. So I wouldn't be surprised if I went to a hospital here and they'd have the same instruments that I worked with.
I know one large lab which have a huge, line here in Prague.
Yeah.
Specialized lab.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I don't think I talked about it. For the last 3 meetups before this, I actually had a different presentation. I would typically talk about sort of like the beginning steps you would need to take if you were like brand new to Numerai, like how to get started, sort of a talk. But Joe back there, when he heard that I recently quit my job in the lab world to move into like this crypto Web3 full time, he thought it would be cool for me to talk about that because there's definitely a lot of people, that sort of have the crypto stuff that they do as like a side job. And, a lot of people are interested in like what it takes to actually fully transition out of what they're currently working to move into the space full time. So that's kind of what I'm going to focus on. And actually I'm going to focus on the Numerai part a little bit more after this. Because there was a lot of things that I learned by being active in the community, working with the COE, running spaces on Twitter, and a lot of other things that sort of gave me like those skill sets to work what I'm currently working now. But during that time, I was working in the lab where they wouldn't allow me to do some of this other fun stuff. I was really bored. Like I would like go to the lab, the people would like draw the blood, they would send it to the lab, and then I would like put everything in there, get it prepped, and then I'd run in these machines and it would just sit there. And so I'd just be sitting there in the lab doing nothing. So at some point in like 2014, when I was just about to transition out of the reserves, I started getting into like stock trading and options trading, and that like interested me a lot, like just the whole finance sector. And so it's like I started waking up every day before the market opened. I was like reading the news, and I was just like trying to do something to make up the time for what I wasn't doing at work. So I decided that instead of finishing my degree in the lab science world, because I had just moved into doing this field engineering, I actually switched into finance. So between 2016, 2017, I actually started going for my degree in finance, which was interesting because in like 2020, no, not 2020, when did I get married? I got married in like 2008, so almost 15 years ago, and then I started having kids around this point as well. So like everything that I did, I feel like I did really like early on in life. Like right now I'm only 34. And like, you know, bought a house in LA, so all this stuff I was doing was like part-time in school. So it took like a little bit of extra time for me to get through it, but in 2019, I joined like a student managed fund that had a pool of about $1 million to start, and it was to give scholarships to other students that were trying to move into becoming a CFA, which is in the US like a chartered financial analyst, and a lot of these people would move on to like work for big banks and hedge funds for like analyzing stocks. And so I joined as an analyst in that stock fund, and shortly after that I actually got my own scholarship to take the CFA, which I had to stay an extra semester, and that extra semester that I stayed, the graduation date was right when COVID started and all the restrictions started going on. So I actually wasn't able to walk on stage. They did like a remote graduation, so it's like I got dressed up in my house and like had the graduation. So that really killed like everything that I had going for me. Like I really wanted to like move into the hedge fund world, take the CFA exam, you know, be that guy in New York with the suit on that was running around, you know, making all the money in the hedge funds. Like all that stuff went away. But fortunately, as I like started trading crypto again, in 2020 I found Numerai. So yeah, I just talked about it now, but COVID put a stop to my journey. When NMR was listed on Coinbase was actually when I found out about Numerai, because I got like an automated email, and like this was actually, I had to search for it for a bit, but this was actually the description that was sent to me in the email in 2020. NMR is a cryptocurrency that powers Numerai, San Francisco-based hedge fund that crowdsources artificial intelligence to make investments in stock markets. So like everything that I wanted to do, it's like this token magically like popped up right after all this stuff was going down. My problem was I had zero data science background, so it was like this was something that I was super interested in, but like what did I need to do to get started? So this is kind of where I'm going to get into what I had to do myself as a non-data scientist, somebody that literally knew nothing getting in. So the first thing was actually being actively involved in the Numerai community. So these are like some of the resources that are out there currently that everybody can use to participate in the ecosystem. At the end, I also have the new Discord link because we no longer use Rocket Chat, but for myself, like the Numerai docs is like a good starting place for me. So for those who haven't looked at the Numerai docs, you can definitely take a look at that. It has, you know, links to some example notebooks and sort of gave me like that structure that I needed to do some additional research out on the internet. And then Rocket Chat, of course, was huge. Now we moved to Discord. But that's, like I said in here, this is like where a lot of the magic happened. You know, if I had questions about anything, like I could literally type into the chats and like somebody would come in there and like help me out. Back then we had those daily Twitch streams that we talked about earlier. There's also Numerai forums. I was reading books, checking out the example model, and then what I was doing was like, I sort of had this like basic coding knowledge from high school when they like, you know, told me here, like learn C++ and Java or whatever the hell they told me in high school. I sort of knew the structure of what I needed to do, so what I was doing was taking those libraries that were in the example models, you know, I would search them on the internet, and then I would actually go to those libraries and like read about them, and then those would take me to like other libraries, and then that combined with the books and the Rocket Chat and the website and the docs and everything, I sort of started figuring out what I needed to do. So I took actually several months before I started staking anything, and I would say for anybody to do that as well. You know, we talked about it a little bit earlier. A lot of times you need at least 2 to 3 months at minimum to test the model before, I mean, at least for me, like I wouldn't stake a model right away unless I knew that it had a good track record for at least a couple of months.
Or just a little bit for DJ. Like,
Yeah, a little bit, you can, you know, do what you want. But you know, it's like one of those things where you can like see something running perfect, and then as soon as you put money down, it goes down. So my initial model of venturing actually was performing well, and I was like super surprised because it was like the first model that I made. I did some research which took me to like another library, which I thought was interesting. That was like based on another library that seemed pretty popular, but it was different. And I just knew that with the way that Numerai worked, it was like you needed to create models that were unique, but also worked well. So I didn't want to use any of the libraries anybody was talking about. So I like actually stayed away from XGBoost. I stayed away from like GBM, like all these other like really common models. And I found another library that I thought was interesting that was sort of based on tree-based models, but set up a little bit different. So I set something up and I just threw it out there, and it was actually doing really well. In like early 2021, there was sporadic chatter about NFTs in the chats, and you know, we're a community of data scientists and nerds and really smart people, and you know, when NFTs first started kind of popping into the spotlight, you know, people were making jabs at it. Oh, what is this? This is a scam. You know, a lot of that stuff. But really, like the first lengthy discussions started actually happening around NFTs in March when People, who's an artist, sold a piece at a auction house for $69 million in March, and that's really what like kicked off that whole NFT storm throughout 2021 into 2022. The COE also formed in 2021, and there was a couple of people within the community that actually created their own NFTs. They were like, you know, I think Jeremy Barrows, for those that know him, created like these little NMR tokens and these little like AI artworks and stuff. So, you know, I was like collecting from him, just, you know, being a part of the community. Didn't really think anything of it, but I think it was when HB, who I talked about earlier, actually started selling his models, his NFTs, and I think Richard actually used him a lot talking about that. He actually would create these like weekly prediction files. He would just put his logo and then like sell the NFT, and it came with an unlockable, and the unlockable content was the prediction file. So he would, just for fun, he was like kind of testing these around. And these are like some of the examples of some like community-made like NFTs from 2021. HB stepped down towards the end of 2021, and then I volunteered as a replacement for him, and luckily nobody else wanted to do it. So, you know, it was an interesting time. Like towards the end of 2021 into 2022, it's like, you know, the peak of the crypto market. It was just like starting to make its downturn over the last year and a half. But yeah, I mean, even though I was by myself, they voted me in, and this was a post that I put together. after the first year of, I feel like I'm going too long, huh? Is that okay? Okay.
It's okay.
Faster.
It's okay.
These are like some of the things that the COE did, and maybe actually I'll come back to this when we do our fireside chat, just so we have something to talk about. But yeah, there was like a lot of different things that we were doing as a group. The community was still pretty active back then. It was like just before everything started to drop down. So around this time was actually when I kind of started falling in love with like the whole Web3 and NFT side of things. I was starting to get more involved in like those kind of communities. I was actually starting to go to meetups like locally in LA. There was like NFT conferences that were like merging with crypto conferences during that time, and I was starting to attend a lot of those and started going to the Numerai parties, and then we also had the Numericon that was going down in San Francisco. So I really just like, once I realized this was like my new passion, and like now I knew I could work for a hedge fund without actually working for a hedge fund, it was like, oh, maybe I should figure out a way to do this thing full time. I didn't write it in here, but I did plead with Richard a bunch to let Numerai hire me as like a marketing person and some other stuff, and they did not want any of that. So anyways, that didn't work out. But really, like, getting involved for me was how I knew I would be able to really enter the space. So these were like some of the skills that I really took away from being a part of the Numerai community and like joining the COE, like working in a team, controlling the multi-sig, you know, getting a pulse for the community, seeing what they want to see built, and like helping get those things going, assisting in getting proposals funded, marketing, hosting events. It helped my social media usage. I was never a big like Instagram or Twitter person, but you know, because I was trying to promote the Council of Elders and help promote community members, like that helped me in my like social media usage as well. I still suck at public speaking, I think, but I still try to do it, and project management. So what's really interesting, and I'll try to make this story quick, is how the actual idea itself of the COE actually got me my first job in the NFT space, which is interesting. So you'll see a little chat here, and so that guy right there, he goes by G Money. He is pretty big in the Web3 space. He's really well known for buying this ape punk, and this is part of like the crypto, like the original crypto punks from 2017. I think he spent $150,000 or something to buy this punk, but it was still pretty early on. Later on, he like helped advise Prada and like Adidas and a couple other fashion brands into crypto and Web3. And so this was like a short little snippet of a conversation that I had with him really early on, because I got involved in his community after meeting him at a convention. The idea of this COE being like a separate entity that's community ran from like the main company, I thought would have a lot of other use cases besides just the COE. So within like a lot of these NFT communities, it was really popular, like as new projects and new companies were moving into the space, they would try to market and promote themselves by going into other communities and like marketing their projects. But as you all know, and this happens not just in NFTs but also in crypto, there's like a lot of scammy shit going on. There's a lot of like cash grabbing going on. There's a lot of companies that are like just in it for the money. And so it's like really hard as a team person to really like, you want to give the community something that's beneficial for them, maybe help them make a little bit of money, get them involved in like other projects, but at the same time you don't want to promote a project that's gonna like fuck you over later, really. So I actually took the idea that Richard had of the COE and actually embedded it within this community. And this was my little conversation I had with him. So what we actually did was I created pretty much a COE inside this NFT community. So anytime another project would want to come in, partner, or collaborate, instead of it coming from the official source, which was like him and the team, it actually came from us. It was community run. That way, if there was any kind of issue that came up out of it, it didn't look like it came from the official source, if that makes sense. So with that and like my background in actually working with the community here, G-Money actually hired me to be the community lead for his like private NFT community, and then he also launched his own luxury fashion brand, which I won't get into though. Bear market blues. Why it took a year for me to leave Web2 to get into Web3. There was way too much competition for full-time jobs. A lot of companies were losing money, of course. And every time something new came up, it felt like I was competing with like 100 or 200 other people for the same job. And I was doing it like I was sending countless resumes to like from small NFT communities all the way to like huge exchanges like Coinbase and Numerai. Nobody was calling me back. Like I was having all sorts of issues. So for me, like it was really just not giving up. And what I realized later on, after actually getting hired on contract as a community lead, is I realized that if I was able to do that with like several companies instead of just working for one company as like a consultant, I can literally just stack those contracts on top of each other. So short story is that I created a company in the US that's just me as a consultant, and I started working with other companies. And what I was actually doing, and I think this could work in crypto as well, I don't think it's just something in NFTs. I think we're all in a bear market right now. Everybody's having issues, everybody's running really lean. If you can go into a company and say, hey, maybe you don't need to hire me full time, let's save you a little bit of money, don't give me any benefits, let's just hire me on contract, I'll save you guys like X amount of money per year. How would that work? And that actually started working for me. There was like 2 other companies within like a really short period of time that liked the idea of just hiring a contractor instead of a full-time person. So that was really what like launched me to be able to get out. So conclusion is, of course, not give up. Be active in the communities that you're a part of. For me, I like did a lot of help in projects for free before I actually started asking for money. Networking, attending conferences. This is like a perfect example of showing up to an event in your local area to meet other people and get to know each other. Took a lot of sacrifice. My short story on that is I was in NFT NYC, which was a conference in New York. And I literally didn't know if I was gonna have like enough money to pay like the mortgage on the house for the month, because it was like I was running so lean, and like to fly all these different places was getting super expensive. But I just knew like people needed to see me all the time, and the more they saw me, like the more they can trust me, and like it ended up working out. So definitely took a lot of sacrifices, a lot of fights with my wife, but it worked out. And again, don't give up. So this is me. That's what I look like online. Registering in Discord ETH is the Twitter. And for those who haven't joined the Numerai Discord that are interested in getting in the community and joining and creating models, make sure to get in that Discord right there, discord.gg/Numerai. Questions? No. Pretty self-explanatory. Cool. Thank you. Oh, we got one.
What's the next thing that's happening now after NFTs? Like where is the crypto community going?
The crypto community or the NFT community?
It's so much different.
Well, it's pretty different. I think, I mean, we were sitting at the table talking about this a little bit earlier, and I'll try to keep this short, but the mainstream media really fucked over the NFT community during like the bull market. We also had part to do with that. Maybe we should have been spending $500,000 on pictures of monkeys in like 2022. But there is like a lot of different subsets of like the NFT community. Like me personally, I'm not really into the whole like profile picture community thing that you see most commonly in the news. As I was telling you, the guy that I work for now, he started a crypto native luxury brand. So we actually have encrypted NFC chips on physical products that are on chain. So as you actually sell the physical products to other people, like you can actually move those digital versions between people and have that certificate of authenticity, like that it's not a forgery, it's on chain, and you can actually see that provenance of like physical items moving between people, which I like. So what's that?
Can you just copy them like the article?
You can't, because the key is actually encrypted, and then it's actually linked to like an actual verified contract on Etherscan. So like so say Gucci came out with like a handbag, you would actually know how many handbags were made because it's like serial numbered, and when you scan it, you can see which number you have, and it actually takes you to a verified collection. Like this is the Gucci bag collection for winter 2023, and so that's like something that we haven't seen in like luxury fashion. There's like loyalty point systems like involved with that. There's also like tokenized media that's becoming pretty popular, like crowdsourcing media, fact checking. Like I think a lot of people are sick of like the way that the media runs now, where the companies themselves decide what they want to put out and they decide what they want you to read. But to actually have like a community of people to like fact check things that are coming out and help you to like curate news articles, like solves a lot of those problems. So there's a lot of different aspects of the NFT communities. There's a lot of different sections. There's also the whole generative art community as well. People that have been creating art with code for like many years before NFTs. This goes back into like the 60s when people were actually printing out artworks like on huge rented machines on like dot matrix printers. It's like artwork, and so I think like 20 years ago, it's P5.js, which is a JavaScript library and processing, which a lot of artists use to actually code out artwork. So it's like artworks is not drawn by hand, it's actually drawn by code, which has become very big. There was an auction 2 weeks ago where a piece sold for like $6 million. So in the art scene, like that's also becoming really big as well. So there's definitely a lot of subsections of NFTs, but I think we're just super early still. And I think a lot of people are optimistic when they say it's like 2 years away. I think it's more like 5 to 10 years away, but I'm just sort of being realistic. I mean, we still need to see this like move into gaming and a lot of other stuff. But essentially, yeah, I don't think anything's gonna move either way until like the markets move just like everything else.
What exactly was sold for 6 million? The printout or
it was actually like the digital, like the actual artwork itself, like the digital version of it. Like it can be printed, but like the digital itself is the actual art piece. It was called Ringers. It's a very popular collection by an artist that's been doing art for a long time. So this is the Art Blocks is a company that features different artists. These are only gen artists, and these are actually all on chain. Another one of the arguments that we talked about earlier is that a lot of people argue like NFTs are interesting because like most of the images are just put on like IPFS, and if like anything were to happen to those images, then they would just be like blank images, and then you would just be left with just like the blockchain ledger. But all these artworks and these like generative art stuff that I've been talking about is actually all built on chain. So there's no IPFS involved. So this is a collection called Ringers. It's an algorithmic addition of 1,000 different pieces. So each time a piece was minted, like a different unique piece was created. 1 out of the 1,000 people saw this image of like a goose inside. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. So it just became the famous piece. Sorry. So this is the goose. So you can see right now it's owned by Sotheby's, which is a huge auction house. But if you actually look right in the middle, there's actually a goose people can see in the middle. And so people just thought, wow, this like algorithm created this piece that like literally has this goose like sitting in the middle of it, and that just became the famous piece. So if you look right here at the last sale, August 27th, it sold for 1,800 ETH.
Best offer is 30.
Yeah, with the best offer of 30 ETH. But anyway, that's my long answer to your question. It's a lot more than low-key pictures,
Yeah.
and there's definitely a lot of stuff going on in the background. Any other questions? Yeah.
Since you're active in the NFT community, so the Numerai community or Numerai chat quite slow, basically.
Yeah.
So not that much going on. Is it the same in the other communities?
It is exactly the same. We're running into the same issues, and it actually worries me already that I like just left my job to like do this shit full time, because like we're running into this issue, like we're seeing it everywhere. Like most discords of most communities are all having the same issue. I mean, you have the bear market with summertime. Kids are out of school, people are going on vacation. I live in Los Angeles and I'm here in Prague. I'm not on Discord right now. So it's just a lot of, there's just a lot of lack of involvement everywhere. So solving that issue has been really hard. I mean, I've tried a lot of different things. Anything from posting like Twitter spaces, trying to highlight members of communities, to like weekly Discord chats, to networking sessions, to like IRL meetups in different locations around the world, but it's hard. And I'm actually glad that you brought up the Numerai community, because that's another interesting one, because we did talk about earlier that the Numerai team did in fact create like an official Numerai NFT collection, which we still haven't seen what that is actually going to be used for, if anything. But I think it still has a lot of interesting use cases within the Numerai tournament itself. Like I myself, just being so involved in the NFT community, can think of like several really fun things they can do, because these are all on chain and you can actually burn them and do lots of fun stuff. So like one of my ideas was like, what if like every NFT could be like a get out of burn free card, where like if you chose to burn an NFT when you like submit your predictions, maybe for that round like you don't get burned. There's like a
beforehand.
what's that?
In terms of getting the system, if you can beforehand do that.
Yeah, I mean, so if you, but see, it's like an NFT collector and somebody that knows the use cases, and I know, even though Numerai won't admit it, both Chris, there's a couple of people that work on Numerai that were also doing NFT collectors in 2021, and they know the use cases. So I myself, like when NFTs first came out, me and there's only like a couple of people, like I was actually buying NFTs on the secondary market as well. So like, I think they gave everybody 2 for free per account. I think I have like 12 of them now, because I was like buying up some. Because at like any point, I feel like they can be like, we're gonna do this, and I'll already be sitting there, pretty not financially, but yeah.
One of the things that I saw this group was like, with one that's from my developer can be quite boring when it's just him. talking to the screen, but the last one had Michael Phelps as well.
Yeah.
And there was like just also a bit of banter going around.
Is that his name? Mike, isn't? I don't
Not
think it's
Phelps,
Phelps.
right?
No, that's the swimmer. That's
Yeah,
the Olympic
swimmer.
swimmer.
What is his name? Felix Thomas.
Yeah, Michael Phillips. Yeah, he's also another secret NFC collector, by the way.
Yeah, but we used to have this banter more when arbitrage was running. There was 12 in the screen.
Yeah, because Arbitrage had Twitch streams, and then he also had office hours,
Yeah.
which we didn't talk about at all.
Office hours was
Office hours with Arbitrage is cool. And that's sort of like what I do with some of these NFT communities. I actually find people in the community that are like doing something interesting. Like they could be creating their own artwork, they could be starting their own company, just doing something fun. And what I do is actually like pick those people out of the community and like actually have a chat with them like publicly on my Twitter spaces.
It would still work if you just, anyone would be good at it, but it was the interaction that was fun rather than just having Oliver discuss a paper. It's a bit boring.
Yeah.
And having them first discuss aliens and before they switched to Numerai was really fun to just watch. And then the discussion between them about,
It's my favorite one.
yeah. They were first discussing like building the rain data set, and then the other Michael Phillips, I guess, was discussing why he couldn't go through. Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't work. So it was nice to see this happening and see the people. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard right now. I mean, I feel like, maybe we can stop. Maybe we should just start I feel like we're having a fireside chat right now. Maybe we should just